It's that time of year when teachers are starting to think about professional development and continuing education courses for the summer. I am so excited to announce that the Savvy Dance Teacher Applied Dance Science Teacher Training course is back again for another year. It's happening September 1st and 2nd in the Vancouver area, and registration is now open. For those of you who may not know, the Savvy Dance Teacher is a 2-day in-person practical course that covers the latest in applied dance science topics. If you're looking to incorporate more injury prevention, functional anatomy, active mobility, strength and conditioning, and lots of other stuff into your teaching, this is the course for you. For more information, check out www.allegroperformance.com/thesavvydanceteacher. And if you use the code SAVVYEB before July 1st, you can save $100 off your registration. And now, here's today's episode.
Hello, and welcome to the Dance Physio Podcast, a podcast designed to explore ideas and foster discussion around dancer health and wellness. We're here to challenge the status quo, bridge the gap between dance science and the studio, and help change the landscape of the dance industry for the better. I'm your host, Erika Mayall, a dancer turned physiotherapist who is deeply passionate about leaving the dance world better than I found it. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dance Physio Podcast. I am your host, Erika Mayall. Today, we are going to look at red light therapy and its benefits or potentially lack thereof in terms of healing and recovery for dancers. Red light is one of those things that we see quite a lot, especially online. And maybe this is just my algorithms, but I'm sure a lot of people, if you're ever Googling recovery or healing or anything like that, these things start to come up. You start to get fed more and more of the same information. And so I have had quite a few people reach out to me to sort of ask, is red light therapy beneficial? What is red light therapy? How does it work? Is it just a gimmick? Are they just trying to sell me a product? All of the things. So today I want to dive into what red light therapy is, some of the kind of background behind it, and how it can be used, especially for dancers, but when we're thinking about healing and recovery. So before we can dive into kind of its uses and that sort of thing, we're going to have a little lesson on what red light actually is, because I think it's really, really helpful to understand. And especially if it's something that you're considering going out and buying one of these products, actually understanding how it works and the theory behind how it works is really important when you are shopping for a product. And I'll kind of explain why as we go along. So the concept of light as a healing element or a healing modality is not new. It has been around for thousands of years, and probably through many indigenous cultures and certainly through ancient, sources that we have even in the world of medicine and stuff. This is not a new concept. There was this concept of sunlight as medicine that goes back thousands of years. But in more recent years, and a lot probably because of our lifestyle and us living in cities and just the way society has evolved, we do not get the same exposure to light and to sunlight that people got thousands of years ago. So people were exposed just to sunlight in general, living a more transient outdoor lifestyle, and then also firelight a lot as well when they, were sitting around campfires or just fires where they're cooking their food or that sort of thing. In modern society, we live most of our life indoors, at least in a lot of places in the world, and we may go outside for recreational purposes, but in terms of our day-to-day living, it is often done indoors, whether that's going to school, going to work, where we're living in our houses. Dancers especially spending so much time in the studio. When we compare dancers to other athletic populations that are an outdoor sport, say soccer players or things like that, dancers have significantly lower levels of exposure to light and to sunlight, and also then have, by kind of default lower levels of vitamin D and things like that. And that's not what I'm going to get into today. But this, like I said, is a byproduct of the society and the culture that we are living in today. And so there has been an uptick in people producing light therapy machines. So you might be familiar with some of those seasonal affective disorder machines, kind of SAD lights, people kind of call them, or more commonly right now, or what we're going to talk about mostly today, red light therapy, as a way of trying to harness some of the benefits that we know light has because we are not necessarily being exposed to it in the same way that our ancestors potentially were. So like plants, humans and the human body needs light for health, and specifically for the health of cellular functions within our body. And we're going to talk about that more in a second. And so I like to think of it, or it's easy to sort of think of, as light is a little bit like a nutrient for our cells to function optimally. So we know that we need to provide nutrients in the form of like carbohydrates and fats and proteins and things like that. We can actually think of light as one of those nutrients that our cells need to function optimally. Light occurs along an electromagnetic spectrum. And this is probably going to take you back to, I don't even know what grade it would have been, but let's say grade 9 science, something, high school science. Will kind of take a little step back. And if we remember what that electromagnetic spectrum looks like, it includes all wavelengths of light. So the ones that we can see. And so those are a very small percentage of wavelengths of light. So the ones that we can see is that Roy G. Biv, or those like kind of, we think about them as like the rainbow wavelengths in the middle, but it also includes the light waves that we cannot see. So the unseen ones, which can include things like gamma rays and X-rays and infrared light and things like that. So we have this massive spectrum of light, and like I've been alluding to, we measure it in wavelengths. And the unit of measure that we generally use is something called nanometers. So it's like a little tiny lowercase n-ish thing and then an m. So if you ever see something written like that, and especially, again, I'll talk about this more later, if you're shopping for a product like a red light therapy product, that's one of the things you want to look at, is that little nanometer, because we want to know what wavelengths of light we are exposing ourselves to. So within that spectrum, there are types of light that affect the cellular function, like I was just saying. And so we term these, or like in the literature often, this is being termed bioactive light. So if you're trying to do research on this or searching for terminology, bioactive light is the wavelengths of light that have an effect on cellular function. Like I said, they're generally measured in nanometers, so that's the wavelength. And only a small percentage of that is visible to the human eye. So generally the wavelengths between about 400 and 700 nanometers are the ones that are going to be visible to us. And then we have wavelengths below that and above that that are not visible to the human eye. In the literature, again, when we think about this bioactive light, often the term that's being used, and again, if you want to research this and look into this, it is being called photobiomodulation for the most part when you're looking at literature. So it is looking at that biomodulation using photo or light waves. So most commonly in the literature, the wavelengths that have been studied the most are red or near infrared, which is where the term red light therapy came from. There are products on the market. There are other types of light wavelengths. Blue light is actually one that is also commonly used. I'm not going to talk about blue light today. But when we are talking about red light therapy, that is generally what we're talking about, is this wavelengths in that red category, or those red wavelengths. And then also the near infrared gets included in a lot of the research. And so some of the research separates those out, but a lot of it is just going to refer to it as photobiomodulation in general, and or more simply red light therapy. So if you're wondering where the term came from, that is kind of where it came from. So red light, the wavelengths of that are generally between 600 and about 750 nanometers, and they are the longest wavelengths of visible light that we can see. Blue, so again, we think about our rainbow, so we go down to like blue and indigo. Those ones are going to be the shortest wavelengths. But when we're talking about red light therapy, red is going to be between 6 and 750 usually. And then near infrared is just above that. So sort of 750 and then up to maybe like 1400 nanometers. It is, again, not visible to the human eye. And this is important because, again, when we talk about how we look for and source products, we need to know that information. In more specifically, when we look at the research and we look at the literature, there's an even more specific wavelength that has been studied to be the most, or has been found to be the most effective for the benefits that we're looking for. And I'm going to talk about the benefits and the difference between red and near infrared in a second. But specifically for red light, we are looking for a range between 630 and 680 nanometers. So 630 to 680 is that range where we're going to see the best or the most significant therapeutic benefits. So remember, red light goes from 600 to 750, but for therapeutic benefits, we really want to look at that 630 to 680-ish wavelength. In terms of the benefits specifically to red light, and those are those wavelengths between 630 and 680, red light is generally being absorbed in the skin. And so it has a lot of benefits to more surface level functions, so improved skin health. So you'll see this used a lot in more cosmetic type things where, there's going to be claims of decreasing fine lines and wrinkles and that type of thing. There is an effect on collagen production. So we have increased collagen production with red light therapy being used. But like I said, at that wavelength of 630 to 680, generally we're going to see effects on the skin. Near infrared, on the other hand, like we said before, it ranges from 750 to about 1400. But for those therapeutic benefits, or what we see in research that is the most beneficial, is between about 800 and 880. So somewhere in that kind of low near infrared range. So we're not necessarily getting up to 1400. It's 800 to 880. And these wavelengths are going to be able to penetrate deeper. So again, near infrared is not visible to the human eye, but it penetrates deeper into the tissue. So we have our red light that's going to be more surface level, and then the near infrared that penetrates deeper. And this has the effect that probably from a perspective of dance, we are most interested in when we think about healing and recovery, because this penetration into the deeper layers of the tissue, we see decreases in pain levels. Red light therapy is incredibly beneficial for decreasing pain levels. We see decreased inflammation. We see improved speed of healing. So like recovery, or if there is an injury or damage to the tissues, we see improved speed of healing with that. So again, this infrared or near infrared is the wavelengths that we're probably more interested in. That being said, there is overlap and overlapping benefits between red and near infrared. And most devices, at least the ones that I am familiar with, and I probably should not make a sweeping statement and say most devices, the ones that I am familiar with are usually combining red and near infrared, because again, we can't see near infrared with the naked eye, like it's not visible to the human eye. And so the red light is visible, and so we often are getting the combined benefits of red light, which is a little bit more surface level, and then the near infrared, which is going to penetrate more deeply and get to the deeper levels of tissue. So our muscles, tendons, ligaments, things that we might potentially be more interested in from a dance perspective. Like I said, red light itself is used hugely within the cosmetic world because of its surface benefits, but for us, we're going to think more so about its effect on the deeper tissues. So how does this actually work? I'm going to get super nerdy for a second for people who are truly interested in like, how does this work? What is the mechanism? Bear with me. If high school science is not your thing, then maybe skip ahead a few minutes too. But I do want to give you a bit of an idea, because I do think that if we can understand how it works, it makes it much easier for us to then be consumers and decide if this is something that we think is going to be beneficial or helpful to us as dancers. So how does it work? It works through the mitochondria. And again, if you remember anything from high school science, you probably remember that the mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. There was like a meme going around a while ago that was something along those lines, and everybody was like, oh my goodness, flashbacks to high school science. But essentially, the mitochondria are responsible for energy production within our cells. So, number one, pathway, how red light and near infrared work. We get increased cellular ATP production at the level of the mitochondria. That's just a fancy way of saying, and again, I'm not going to break down ATP production for you, but that's basically a fancy way of saying we have increased cellular activity at the mitochondria, and the mitochondria are these powerhouses of our cells that basically produce energy. So if we have increased cellular activity, we get improved blood oxygenation, we get improved blood flow going to cells, we see this increased collagen production, like I said, and again, especially people who are really interested in skin health, that collagen production is one of the big reasons why red light is really popular. But again, we have collagen in all of our tissues in our body. So it's not just in our skin. We have collagen in our muscles and in our tendons and ligaments and everything. So we get increased collagen production. We see a decrease in overall inflammation within the cells, within the body, and we see increased cellular regeneration. So the sort of faster, quote unquote, the cellular processes are within the cell, we get this higher rate of turnover within the cells. So increased cellular regeneration, which if we had an injury and we're looking at tissue repair and tissue healing, we potentially want that increased cellular regeneration, because that is how the tissue is going to repair itself, whether it's muscle, tendon, ligament, whatever it is. So that is one pathway through which red light and infrared work, is through this increased cellular ATP production. Number two, we also see a building of cellular antioxidant and anti-inflammatory defenses. So basically, this results in decreased oxidative stress for the cells, which protects it against, or protects the tissue, so the cells in the tissue, against further inflammatory sort of assaults, for lack of a better word. So basically, all of that is sort of a fancy way of saying it builds the robustness within the tissues and within the cells to be able to withstand inflammation and to then not necessarily have such a quote unquote negative effect of inflammation. And then thirdly, red and infrared has a direct effect on our circadian rhythm. And for those of you who don't know what that is, circadian rhythm is basically our wake-sleep cycles. So our body's sort of natural body clock of knowing when it is in an awake state and when it is in an asleep state. And we rely really, really heavily on light for regulation within those systems to happen. And like I was talking about at the beginning, in society, especially because we are indoors, and then even more especially because we spend a lot of time on screens, and screens emit a different type of light, it can have a disrupting effect on our natural circadian rhythms. So red and infrared light can actually help to regulate those sleep-wake cycles and help to support kind of healthy sleep and hormone and mood and energy levels and all of those things. So although those effects are maybe not directly related to cellular tissue repair from an injury perspective, for a lot of dancers, sleep and recovery is something that they often really struggle with. And it can be for a variety of reasons. Some of it is to do with schedules, and some of it is just to do with, performing super late at night, and it throws off those natural circadian rhythms. So we can actually use red light to try and rebalance those. And specifically looking at specific dosing of red light at particular times of the day. So first thing in the morning, or before you go to bed to wind down before bed. So light therapy, although I think when people think about it in terms of recovery and healing, we are often thinking at a tissue level. I think there's really important benefits that we want to remember or think about also from the perspective of, can we be supporting dancers' sleep hygiene, which in turn is going to have an effect on hormone balance and mood and energy levels and all of those things as well. So some really, really big reasons why red light therapy may be something that we want to incorporate into a dancer's healing and recovery. So that's a little bit about the science behind sort of how it works. There's actually a pretty decent body of literature and research supporting the effects of red light therapy. So again, I think a lot of times people are rightfully skeptical of some of the claims that are made online and through like marketing and products that are trying to sell you something. But if you actually dive into the literature, specifically at some of those really specific wavelengths, there's actually some really, really decent research to support red light therapy as a good modality for healing and for recovery. That being said, not all red light is created equal in terms of what are we looking for in a product? And so this is why I wanted to like really dive into like what red light is and how it works. Because I think as a consumer, if you're like, okay, I'm sold, everything you just said sounds awesome, I'm going to go out and invest in some sort of red light device, whether it's a light or a wrap or a mask or whatever it is, I think it's really important for people to understand the background of it so that you can understand what you're looking for in parameters. Because in a lot of things, as soon as we're like, oh, there's benefits to this product, there is this automatic assumption that more equals better. And you see this in the marketing sometimes for some of these products that are on the market where they're like claiming that, you know, we have this wavelength of light or this level of irradiance and power and stuff. And when it comes to red light and red light therapy, more does not necessarily equal better. In fact, more does not equal better. And if the dose is too great, it can actually have sort of, I don't want to say negative effects, but the positive effects of the red light end up being sort of negated. And some of this, and I'm not going to get too much into the science behind it, but some of it is because of how it affects the like cellular rate of what's happening within the cells. And we talked about how it's going to affect inflammation and things. And in previous podcast episodes, we have talked a little bit about how inflammation in certain doses and in certain degrees is actually beneficial within the human body. That is how adaptation happens to things like training loads and even how the healing process gets kickstarted when we have an injury. And so if we dose red light in too high a dose, those healing benefits actually get negated. So more is not better. And you know, that's the case in a lot of things, but specifically in red light. And there, like I said, are companies out there claiming that, you know, they have the most powerful red light on the market or whatever it is they're claiming. And that's not always what we want to be looking for. So what do we want to be looking for? First of all, we talked about the wavelengths previously. So if you're looking at a product, you want that product to tell you what wavelengths it's actually offering. Because I've seen some stuff, you know, you can find some things for pretty inexpensively on some large scale shopping platforms online. And it will not tell you, it'll just say red light, but it will not tell you any specifications of like what those wavelengths and stuff are. And that's a bit of a red flag. You want to be buying from a company that's actually going to tell you what parameters it is they're selling you. So again, for the red light itself, we want 630 to 680 nanometers. And for near infrared, we want 800 to 880. And then we also want to look at what is called the irradiance. It's kind of the power of the light, like how strong the light is. And ideally, so that irradiance or power is measured in milliwatts per centimeter squared most often. If you're in the US, I don't know how they measure it because I'm not sure if they tell it to you in inches squared. So you'll have to do the conversion. I suspect it might actually be given to you in the same units just because of international scientific standards. But anyway, irradiance, we want ideally somewhere between 20 and 40 milliwatts per centimeter squared. So again, you'll see products that say that they emit like at 100 milliwatts per centimeter squared, but more does not equal better. And if they're claiming that, then I would question like how accurate their product actually is. So 20 to 40 milliwatts per centimeter squared. In terms of other parameters in how we're using red light often needs to be used at a really close range. So depending on what we're using it for, that is often going to be at a range of 0 centimeters. So skin contact. And especially if we're thinking about red light and for most of those skin benefits and some of those cosmetic benefits, it needs to be in contact with your skin. And you'll see those red light masks or whatever where people have it like right up against their skin. There are other types of red light devices, so like different red light panels or red light lights, and those ones are often utilized from slightly further away. But if you're standing like 3 feet away from a red light, you are likely not getting the benefits. Generally, we want that distance to be sort of 0 to 12 centimeters, so like within a foot. So you need to be pretty close to the red light source. So this is why I am a big fan of like wraps. So you see like they almost look like heating pads, but they're red light. I am a big fan of that type of red light because you know that it is going to be administered within a close enough range. That being said, I have friends that really, really like the red light panels, and so they'll sort of sit in front of them or not necessarily have it in contact with their skin. So there are different products on the market, but generally we need it to be close enough for it to have the effect that we want it to have. In terms of duration, like how long should we be using it for? What are the parameters of this? Again, more is not better with this necessarily. And so usually the recommendations are between 10 and 20 minutes per day, like one time a day, on a particular area. That being said, if you're using it on multiple areas of your body, then you might be using it for longer. So say you have one of those wraps and you're like, I'm going to use it on my low back and I'll do that for 10 minutes. And then I'm going to use it on my knee and I'm going to do that for, 15 minutes, whatever. If you have multiple issues going on in the body, you may be using it for more time over collectively over the course of a day, but for individual areas, if we're using it really locally like that, 10 to maximum 20 minutes is all you need, and just one time a day. And then in general, we're often recommending sort of 3 to 5 times a week. Again, some people really, really like it and will use it sort of 7 days a week, but a lot of the research is showing kind of 3 to 5 times a week in terms of usage. So I usually sort of recommend, if people like find it really helpful and really like it, I usually recommend 5 times a week if they want to use it more on the high end, but sometimes people will just use it less than that. I also have people who might use it for 3 days in a row and then be like, oh, this feels way better. I don't need to use it anymore. So again, parameters are going to vary slightly depending on the reason and the situation, but generally that is what we are looking for. So when you are looking for a product, again, we want to know the wavelengths, we want to know the irradiance, and then the other parameters like duration and frequency, those you're going to control yourself anyway. But if you're ever looking at a product and they're not giving you that information, that is a bit of a red flag in terms of how effective the product might be, because I do know there are a lot of products on the market that are claiming to be red light or even near infrared products, but they're not necessarily emitting wavelengths that are going to be therapeutically effective. There's also some contraindications of conditions where red light is probably not going to be appropriate. So things like if somebody has active cancer, or if they're currently pregnant, or if they have any sort of photosensitivity disorder, so like light sensitivity and get any sort of reactions to that, open skin wounds, like there's a lot of things. So red light is not going to be for everyone, even though it is generally a fairly low risk modality that has been shown to be effective for things like healing and recovery. We still want to make sure that we know when it is appropriate and when it is not appropriate. So if you have any underlying health conditions, definitely do your own research into whether your condition is appropriate with red light, because there are instances where it would not be a recommended modality for people. All right. I think that that's everything that I want to say. I guess I will just conclude by saying that red light is a therapy that I personally trust. I do use red light. I did a lot of research because I am very, very skeptical about products that come on the market, and also not a huge fan of people like spending money on something that may or may not actually have benefits that it claims to have. But after I got over my initial skepticism and did a bunch of research, I have been a user of red light therapy for a while now and definitely feel and notice the benefits of it. Like I said, I think a lot of it comes down to researching what specific product you want or have or are going to invest in, because the good quality products are not necessarily super, super cheap. And so you want to make sure that what you are investing in is a high quality product so that it actually gives you the benefits of what you have. I personally am a big fan of a company called Fringe. They are a US-based company, and I know that they do really high levels of research into their products, and I personally really trust the products they are putting out, and those are the products that I have been using for the last bit. And so if that is a company that you're interested in researching and looking into, they were super, super, super kind and have given me a referral link or like a discount code. So I will put that referral link in the show notes. You can use code DancePhysioErika10 for a discount of 10% off your orders. It is an affiliate link. I do get a really, really small kind of kickback and commission from them. I actually don't even know what it is, but I'm only recommending that company because, like I said, I've done a lot of research and I really, really trust their products and trust that company. They also happen to be having a sale from July 6th to 12th. Everything's going to be 20% off. So if you are in the market and you are listening to this before July 6th to 12th, definitely go check them out. They're having a big sale. You can use that referral link. Like I said, I'll put it in the show notes. But I am not going to be at all offended if you decide to not buy from Fringe. I just really hope that you will do your research into whatever company you want to buy from, because I am sure there are loads of other reputable companies that are putting out products that meet these parameters. But like I said, this is just a company that I trust and I like and I use their products. But I truly don't care who you buy from as long as you know what to look for in a product and know sort of the parameters of how and when you would use it so that it is giving you the most benefit. All right. That, I think, is all I'm going to say today. If you have any questions, please, please, please feel free to reach out to me. I love interacting with all of you. You can send me an email or send me a DM on social media at DancePhysioErika with a K. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.